Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And today we're talking about Uncharted.
Yes.
Which is a film I really wasn't looking forward to very much because it's based on a series of video games.
Yes.
PlayStation games that I love.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about those video games because I don't know anything about them.
Yeah, so the Uncharted series started in 2007 and there have been 5 main games in the series. And it follows this character called Nathan Drake. And one of the things about people wanting to see in a movie version, they wanted to see Nathan Fillion cast as him, who's an actor who is in Firefly, Serenity, and a few other things, but he's never been a huge star.
I never heard of him.
No, well, I'm surprised that you haven't heard of him, but he's never been a huge star. But there was a short film, a fan movie made of Uncharted, which had him in it in the main role, and it was good. Like, it wasn't an amazing movie, but it really sold him as the guy. The thing is, by the time this film's being made, he's really too old for it. And what they've done is they've cast younger anyway, because they're treating this as a kind of origin story for the character of Nathan Drake. So Tom Holland plays the role. And it's a different story from what you get in the games, because you do see the origins in the games, and it's different. And that's kind of one of the reasons that I really enjoyed this film, is because it's just treated as a totally different thing, really.
Yes.
It references the games an awful lot, but it doesn't... It's so different in so many ways that you just go, this is a totally different thing. It's a different treatment of the same material, in a way.
And yet you said at the beginning of the film, which starts with lots of things falling off this airplane, including Tom Holland hanging on for dear life, is a staple image from the games.
Yeah, so I was just showing you a scene from Uncharted 3, which was probably 2011 or so, where the main character, Nathan Drake, is having a fight on a cargo plane, and then he pulls the cord and opens the back of the plane, or actually the other guy opens the back of the plane, but either way, he pulls the cord, all the cargo starts flying out, it's hanging on for dear life, and he's hanging on to it for dear life. And this is a scene that is directly redone in the film. And the film is doing quite a bit of this, so there are other scenes which are taken from other games. So particularly Uncharted 4, which is about this search for kind of pirate treasure. The end of the film is the same in some ways as the end of that game, where you find this pirate ship in a big cave. It's beautiful. And also the auction scene here, where they're having to steal this cross, is basically the same as something in that game as well.
So is it like an amalgamation? Is the film an amalgamation of the different games, or?
Yeah, to an extent. And it's taking the same kind of raw material and building something slightly different out of it. So when I talk about the casting, one of the things that was kind of worrying was the character of Sully in particular, who is Nathan Drake's mate. He's his older friend, and they go treasure hunting together. And in the games, he's like 60 odd, and he's got white hair and a big mustache and a big cigar, and he's chomping all the time. And I always thought a good piece of casting for that would be who's the guy who played J. Jonah Jameson in the Spider-Man movies? J.K. Simmons. Like, he has that same kind of thing to him. And one of the ways that they play off each other in the games is that Sully is really all about the treasure, and he's not really about the adventure, and he's not about the intellectual pursuit, which Nathan is. Like, Nathan has this aspect to him, which is he loves the stories. All these games are based on these legends, and they're real legends. You can't, you won't learn a lot from the games, but you can actually learn a little bit about kind of ancient cultures and ancient stories and things, or these legends from the past. So you have, like, the Gunsway heist is what Uncharted 4 is based around, which is this historic kind of pirate heist, and then it leads to this lost city. They're always finding lost cities and lost empires in these games. So they come across Libertalia in that one, which is this fabled pirate city that the pirates all set up so they can enjoy their gold in. You find it in that game, and it's fantastic.
They reference Raiders of the Lost Ark in the film, and it's
This is something else interesting. I mean, I'm all over the place, but I was thinking about when I was talking to Russell on his podcast, Not Just for Kids, probably in the last year or so. We've done a couple of Indiana Jones movies, and one of the things that I brought up on that podcast with him was how much it reminded me of the Uncharted games. And obviously the Uncharted games build off Indiana Jones in a big, bad way. And one of the things that really reminded me of it was the use of the notebook, which you see here as well in this film. The use of the notebook is kind of key in those games, because it's all about, like, you get like Francis Drake's notebook and all the notes that he kept, and you have to try and decode them or work out what he was saying, and you find these maps and they link to other things and blah, blah, blah. And there's this intellectual pursuit to the whole thing, which is part... I mean, there's a puzzle-solving element to the games as well, right? So you're not just fighting people and exploring, but you're also trying to solve a puzzle to get under the crypt and blah, blah, blah. Again, you see that here. And so, but in that podcast, I was thinking, God, it reminds me so much of Indiana Jones. And then watching this film makes me think of the differences between this and Indiana Jones, particularly in that Indiana Jones, the character, is a professor, and here they're treasure hunters, and so there's this aspect to these characters which is criminal, which I never really thought about before until seeing this today.
Gleefully criminal, because actually our introduction to the Tom Holland character is him and his brother sneaking into this house to steal something and coming across the map. And then when you see him 20 years later in the present or whatever, what you see him is stealing a bracelet.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So
he's a grifter and he's on the make. But yeah, you're right, it's gleeful, right? And these are fun criminals. There's an interesting thing in the games which doesn't come up here at all, really. The games led to this. They were some of the games in the world that led to this term ludonarrative dissonance. And the idea of that, ludo is playing
yes.
and narrative is story. And dissonance is the difference between them. So what happens in the Uncharted games, which does not happen here to any appreciable extent, is there is a lot of murdering. Like you're basically... The structure of the game and the film, games and the film, is fundamentally, broadly very similar. You've got Nathan and Sully, even though this is where they're meeting in the film, normally they're just together already. They're on the look for this treasure. They're following a story, they're following a map, they've got a little bit of a clue, and then one clue leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And you've also, on the other side, got a big bad villain, who is here played by Antonio Banderas.
It's fabulous.
Yeah, he's lovely in it. Who has a lot of money, a lot of power, and they want this stuff because they want more money and power. And they've hired some other treasure hunter who these two already know because treasure hunters go in the same circles or whatever. So, you have Chloe and whatever here. And then they face off against each other throughout the game and so on. So broadly, they're kind of very similar. But the thing is that in the games, you have the big baddie and they have their minions, hundreds, thousands of these guys who come after you. And so what will happen is you'll go to a new place, you'll go to like the castle in Scotland or the ancient city in the desert or whatever, and you'll find what you're looking for, and then straight on your tail come all the baddies. And then it's your job to fight your way out of there. And so you shoot hundreds of these guys, and yet Nathan and Sully are still charming, friendly, lovely, And so there's this thing that started where it's like people started to question, like, that's where this term came from, ludonarrative dissonance, the difference between what you are actually doing in the game, which is being a manic mass murderer, and what the story is telling you, which is these guys are fun, and they're lovely and charming.
The film handles that.
Well, it's not something that you get here very much at all.
Yeah.
It's a 12A, there's hardly any killing, there's one death at the start, where the guy falls off the thing, and the start is only showing you what's happening at the end anyway.
Yeah.
Where the actual action is taking place. And all of the death, for the most part, is people falling off a high place. And
you never see them like splat.
To the point where when they were shaping up to have a physical fight on the pirate ship, and Sully gets a sword and Nathan gets the dagger, you're thinking, there's no way he's going to use that dagger. Like it's not possible. It's not going to happen. So why are they even trying to sell it? Like the film is not interested in that at all. So that's a big difference. The film doesn't try to address, the possibility that this is going to be violent in any way. It's not. But yeah, we should probably say what the film is about, I suppose.
Yes.
So this is, as I say, kind of an origin story for Nathan and Sully and their partnership. So Nathan, it brings in so much stuff in the game. So Nathan has a brother, and his brother, it turns out, has been working with Sully, and his brother, Sam, has gone, quote unquote. That's what we're told. And so Sully has gone looking for Nathan because he thinks Nathan might know what Sam knew, get him involved in the treasure hunt.
And if I could say something about that, I thought that was really important because, in some ways, this is kind of quite a standard treasure hunt adventure story. But the film begins by rooting it effectively in this loving relationship between the two brothers, which I think anchors the film in a slightly different area that becomes important.
Yeah, absolutely. And having come from the games, you didn't even know for the first 3 games that Nathan had a brother. They introduced him in the 4th and then gave him this whole kind of tragic backstory and things with the brother. It's not exactly the same story either, but he has this brother and so on. But yet, so in the games, the relationship he was always rooted in was Nathan and Sully, and also Nathan and Elena, who's not here at all. Elena is in the games Nathan's love interest, and there's more of a love interest thing going on with Chloe here.
Yes.
Who does appear in the games, and that's by the by. Like the thing about Elena is that she shows up when Nathan is already treasure hunting, and they get together as a grown-up pair. So it makes sense that she's not showing up here. It is something that you miss a little bit as a fan of the games, but that's not the story it's telling. But that central relationship, you're right, it's always set in this film as the search for his brother. It's the longing for his brother, which is really important. And it's something that I really liked, in fact. And I was so nervous about the casting because, well, nervous is not the right term, but just so I had no expectations of it, because I do like Tom Holland and I like Mark Wahlberg, but just knowing the games, I thought, oh, these guys aren't going to fit. And I really liked them both.
Yeah. I mean, I have mixed feelings about Mark Wahlberg because actually I don't like him. But I kind of do. Yeah, so it's a weird thing because, I mean, I would never go see a film because he's in it, really. But he's got a kind of a septic sourness, yeah, that I really like. Yeah, and he's almost always very good, actually. So that might be a dissonance between his star persona and what he represents, and then actually the way he often really is in films, which I do end up liking. And I think this is a film that succeeds on its casting, right? Because, in many ways, it's a by-the-numbers adventure story. I mean, it's quite well done, right? But it's not particularly, dazzling or impressive in any way.
No,
the action scenes are fine.
I agree with that.
It's great to be in, those exotic locations. But I think what really makes it special to me is the casting. I think Tom Holland is incredibly charming. I like him much more than I have done in the Spider-Man films. Yeah, I think it's the first time I've seen him carry a different type of film, and he's actually excellent.
I was thinking it's a film that demonstrates his star persona. He's a star.
He's a star.
Another, because in Marvel, he's amongst other people, and he's one of the bigger players in that. Spider-Man is one of the bigger characters, but he's always amongst other stars. Here, he's carrying it by himself, basically, and he does it.
Yes, because Mark Wahlberg is really, I mean, he's very good and he's very effective, but it actually is a supporting part. Yeah, it's maybe the central supporting part. Yeah, but the film is about the Tom Holland character and his relationship with his brothers and why he's resolving the crime and, who he might or might not fall for. And
absolutely.
He's the central character. But I wanted to say something about the casting because for me it's really crucial. So, I was just going through the wiki page to try to remember everybody's names, really. And, it mentioned how the reviewer in Empire didn't go for the Antonio Banderas character. And let me see what he says so I can quote it accurately. So Nick de Semlien criticized the dialogue between Holland and Wahlberg, opining that it was weak in comparison to those seen in the video games, and called Banderas a colorless villain. Now, I do think that, Banderas' character is underwritten, but all the more reason to have that kind of star casting, because I think he's far from a colorless villain. He's a very kind of dynamic and charismatic villain, and it's Banderas who makes it. He made me laugh or gleeful just, from a turn of phrase or an intonation in the voice, or actually through the raising of an eyebrow. Yeah, he is kind of a star actor in command of those effects. And it's kind of difficult to think what the role would have been without him, actually.
Well, what it comes down to is the bad writing of it, the poor writing of it, or the lack of writing for it, really, is what it is. Because I think we saw something similar in his character in the Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard.
Yes.
He was the villain in that, right? And it's a very similar kind of colourful Spanish villain, but he's basically doing he's doing it himself.
Yes.
The writing is not really there for it. They've gone, Antonio Banderas with his line in colourful Spanish villains can do this, and that's what they've done.
Yes.
So it works, but I think you do constantly feel the lack of writing in it, though.
Yes.
The lack of development.
Yes, but that's kind of different. So I think this is a film that's made by the casting.
Yeah.
Right. I think Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg and Antonio Banderas and the villainess, what's her name? Tati Gabrielle? Who is so charismatic. Tati Gabrielle as Joe Braddock. I think, they make the film. I thought Sophia Ali as Chloe was a bit of a damn squib.
Yeah, she's not everything she could be.
Yeah, and she lacked the charisma of the others, actually, I think. But, you know, I enjoyed it very much. I enjoyed the car chases through Barcelona. I enjoyed, you know, the historical dimension, the search dimension of the maps and what the crosses represent. And
I love all that stuff.
I love all that stuff as well.
And it's really nice to see characters' interest in that stuff. That's one of the things that I realise is so appealing about the games as well, as I kind of mentioned, is that these characters are not just after the money. Sully is after the money and the treasure more than Nathan is. But basically, what Nathan is all about is the history. He loves the history. His name is Nathan Drake, which he believes, he's been told by his parents, as we hear in this film as well, is because he's descended from Francis Drake, famous explorer and so on. Although in the games you do get eventually that no, it's a lie and he made it up himself. But that's also because he wanted to have, you know, he loves Nathan, he loves Francis Drake. He wants to be that. So the thing is, he loves it. He loves all this stuff, and actually, even though it's just a game character or whatever, it's completely infectious. And I think you feel the same thing here. Like, the reason that his brother was involved with Sully in this treasure hunt was because he knows all this stuff, because he loves it just the same. Yes. The reason that Nathan gets involved, he loves it just the same, and he loves his brother.
It's a film, unlike so much of American, contemporary American cinema. It's a film that values knowledge and the pursuit of it, and that values intelligence and smarts. Right, which once was in despair of, you know, because actually American cinema for so long has been almost showing off its stupidity as if, you know, somehow being intelligent or educated is like a crime against humanity or something, right? So it's nice to see, you know, a kind of a valorization of intelligence and knowledge, you know, and the pursuit of it, and a valorization of history in a film, in an action film.
I also want to mention the action scenes. I really love them, actually. I agree with you that they could basically always have been a bit better done.
I like them also.
But I think there's some real... So there's the one bit where they're going through the church in Barcelona. They're trying to work... There's this thing about heaven and hell, which is where it's like, that's the puzzle solving. That's where you would be solving that puzzle yourself in the game, you know. And then it leads to this action scene. Well, it's this very interesting thing where they go under this church, and at the bottom is a nightclub in the basement, and at the top of the church, where Sully is a Papa John's, which is a really, like, I was surprised by that, and it's a really nice kind of, you know, you've got this commercialisation of this kind of historical ancient thing where they're looking for all this history, and they've been commercialised in both ways, in both ends, you know, which I really liked. And then in the bar, you know, they turn it into an action scene, and the music pumps up, and it's a quite short lived because, well, it's just a short action scene. They're trying to get out of the place basically, but I really loved it. I thought it came out of nowhere really, and I really, really enjoyed it.
What I really liked about it, and this might be an effect of the video game, you know, I have this thing about the geography of the scene, and wanting to know where you stand, and if somebody punches there, you fall there, like to be clear about how things are happening, because, you know, as a child, for me, part of the fun in like reading Batman comics and seeing action sequences was that you felt yourself doing them, or you wanted to do them, and you felt, okay, well, if I fall like this, where do I put my foot in order to get up, right? Like, you know, that was part of the pleasure, and I think that's all lost in, you know, kind of that huge constant cutting that you get in contemporary action sequences. But this was a film where, you know, you could play with that. You knew that, kind of. If a punch is there, the person lands there. And actually that was very well signified by the opening sequence of things falling down from the airplane. You always knew where you were and what the effect of a particular action would be. Yeah. And I love that. It made me enjoy it all the more. That's
one of the other two action scenes I want to pick up on. So the falling at the plane scene, which we've mentioned, key scene from the games, and it's done here, is shown twice. And normally this is in a way that is, I find, quite annoying, which is where you open with the most exciting... The games have done this as well. I think number 2 and number 4 both opened with like the most exciting action scene, and then you went back to, you know, 3 weeks earlier. And I always hate 3 weeks earlier. I think in an episode of Rick and Morty it was described as, like, I think people should just start their films when they start, and they can't just cheat by going to the most exciting bits to get your hooks in, you know. But that's what it does.
And save money on the production budget because they just repeat the sequence afterwards.
Well, here's the thing. It starts off with, you know, Nathan's on all this cargo. He wakes up and he's like, oh my God, I'm falling and I've got to try and climb up, and you see a bit of it. And then the rest of the film happens. And then when you get back to that scene, having had it teased a little bit where you see the red Mercedes, you know, and he says, "I don't want this scratched." That's my Antonio Banderas. You know, and it's like, and of course, you know that this car's going to get driven out of the plane because you've seen it happen. So that's a nice little joke. And then when you get back to that scene, you get to see the other part of what's happening in it, because there's this fight happening on the plane where Nathan isn't, involving Chloe and Joe. And, you know, you haven't seen that start. Those characters haven't been introduced yet. So actually, when Nathan jumps up on the plane, it's only you've had 2 shots just to keep up with him. But the rest of the story's been prioritised there. Yeah. Which is nice, right? So actually, you're not seeing the same thing twice. You're seeing the 2 halves of the story at different times.
Yes,
which I really
thought that was good.
Yeah, which is much better than seeing the same thing twice. And also, when it comes to, you know, scene geography and that kind of thing, when they're falling, he and Chloe are falling, and they're in the car, and they're having to chase down the cargo pallet that's got a parachute on it so they don't die. That's all done in one take. And obviously it's all done with CGI and face replacement and things like that. So it's very easy to do it with one take. But it's been considered, right? They've thought about how we're going to show this in one go, how we're going to move the camera around and so on. And it really, really works for me. I loved it. And the other action scene that I wanted to mention is the final one with these pirate ships being hoisted out of the water. So pirate ships, they contain all the gold, they've found what they're looking for, and then obviously the baddies arrive to lift them out of the water with helicopters and fly them to where they can sell it for $4.5.
This is a clever conceptual touch. Yeah, to bring the ocean into the sky.
It's brilliant. I loved it. I thought, you know, I kept thinking, oh, this could be done a little bit better, but I still love the idea of it so much that it becomes this pirate ship fight in the sky where they're being levitated by helicopters. And they make such great jokes out of it. So you've got the thing of all the guys on the one ship. So you've got Nathan and Sully hijack the one helicopter. So then the other helicopter then has to give chase, you know. And so you've got this one pirate ship following the other pirate ship in the sky. And then all the baddies from the one pirate ship swing on to the other pirate ship, like in the classic movie. It's so, like Errol Flynn. It's so good. And then he does, you know, he shoots the helicopter with a cannon that hasn't worked for 400 years. It's so good. And the idea, I mean, it was something that I did not expect in this film at all. It felt genuinely original. I didn't expect anything of that nature. And given the amount of references and things that they've drawn out of the games, I expected it even less, because basically everything had been to some degree copied from the games. I thought, no, this is something I've not seen before. And it's such a great joke.
It was great fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if there were a sequel to it, I would go.
Yeah, and I kind of hope there will be. And maybe they'll make a sequel where all of a sudden they're older and you get to see Nathan Fillion and J.K. Simmons in my dream casting. You know, probably not, but...
Well, actually, I thought the casting was perfectly fine because, you know, I mean, Wahlberg must be 50 now, you know, so he's not that far off.
In terms of age, he's about right, but there's just saying about... If you looked up a picture of Sully from the game, you'd go, no, it's just not the same. He's not the same guy, really. And actually, in that mid-credit sequence that I saw you stopped before you walked out and you saw it, he's given he's got a moustache in it, and he's given a cigar, which are like 2 key features of Sully from the games. So they're basically making the concession that that's who, you know, we know who Sully is. We haven't just got rid of them completely. But that's not who he's been throughout most of the film, and it's just not really the same character. The other thing about the character of Sully in the games is that he does have more affection than he ever shows for Nathan here. And admittedly, they've only just met here, but you know, there's this whole thematic through line with Sully here, which is about don't trust anyone. He's a guy with real trust issues. And his story ends up resolving in him eventually choosing the person over the treasure and saying, trust me and I'll catch you. Right? So like he has a very clear character arc. But it's just not the same guy. You know, whereas the Tom Holland, as someone who knows the games, you go, oh no, this is actually pretty much the same guy. I know this, or at least it's a version of the character I'm completely okay with. And that's basically the way I feel about everything in this film. I feel completely okay, and as a fan of the games, and my experience has not been corrupted or damaged. It won't kill them. It's just a version. It's a little bit like The Walking Dead, maybe, where like there's the comics and there's the TV show and there's the games, and they're all a different version of the same material. You know. Well,
I didn't know the games. I enjoyed it very much. I thought the casting was fantastic. I thought the chemistry was really superb. The action sequences were very good. The set pieces were very good, including, you know, the auction, the running around Barcelona, around Montjuic Park, which, you know, had the combination of the action, but the action in exotic locations, right? You know, the fight with the ships in the sky, I thought was like great fun. And it had like little other pleasures, you know, which I was very pleased to see Stephen Waddington as the Scots henchman, the big Scottish guy. Yeah. So you might not know him, but he was the star of Derek Jarman's Edward II.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
No, I've not, didn't know him.
And I had a real crush on him about 30 years ago. So it was like nice to relive it.
That's nice.
I highly recommend.
Yeah, really surprising. Really surprising. And actually, they've just released a couple of remasters of Uncharted games recently for PlayStation 5, which obviously I've bought. And because I bought them, one of the things is that they sent me an email saying, go and have a free ticket to Uncharted the movie. You know, which just made me think, you know, well, you're just piss scared that everyone's going to, no one's going to see this, everyone's going to hate it. Which is why you're giving away the free tickets. But it worked for me.
Yes.
It's a totally acceptable, really surprisingly fun adaptation of material that I really like, and just a really good, decent, fun action movie in its own right.
All right, well, on that note, thank you very much for listening. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much for listening.
Bye-bye.
Excellent.
Yeah, I kind of dominated that one, I think. But
No, I'm glad you did, though. It's fair enough. You knew more about it. I didn't have any problems with that at all. I welcomed it.
yeah. Good.
So,
I'll tell you the other thing, actually, just quickly, is one thing I was disappointed in, Antonio Banderas doesn't get a very nice death. I mean, it's
Oh, actually, no, I need to say something about that.
Okay, well, go on then.
Yeah. So, my one quibble with it is that there's a tinge of misogyny in the film.
Oh, yeah.
I thought. Right? So there's a kind of a gleeful... I mean, there are basically two women in the story, right? And mind you, they're not like traditional heroines, and one is in fact a villain, right? Yeah. But there's a kind of a gleefulness to the way that Joe is killed, which I don't mind. Yeah, the whole ship falls on her. But then when they're flying and they look down on Chloe, there is a kind of a
so he's sent her to the wrong location, having learned not to trust her, basically, because we've seen him fall for it before, and now he's not. And so you see her in the boat, having gone to the wrong place, and they laugh at her predicament.
So not hugely major in this type of film, but the combination of both those things in a film in which they are the central female characters just felt a bit...
Yeah, I can see that.
Misogynist to me.
I can see that. Well, the thing about Antonio Banderas' death is it comes much more quickly than I expected. I thought it would be he'll be the big one to die at the end of the film. That's when it's going to happen. Mind you, again, having known the games a bit, that tends to be when that happens. And it also happens... So it happens much earlier than the end of the film, and it happens in a much less... ceremonial way than it would. He'd get a big action scene normally, or a big death, and here, just in the middle of talking about why he's here and his family and blah blah blah, he just gets his throat cut by Joe, and then obviously everyone's in on it, and she's like, right, this is ours now. All this treasure's ours. Fuck him. Which I didn't mind the surprise of it. I thought, wow, but I thought, God, he deserves a bit better than that, a bit more show.
Yes. No, I mean, I think that is where it's underwritten. Because, in fact, well, there's two things. He could have done it, and it would have been great. But then, of course, you reduce her role in it.
Yeah.
And she is very charismatic, I think. She brings game to the film as well.
Yeah.
So I didn't mind that at all, actually.
I think most of it works. It's just, I suppose it's a shift in the dynamic, because he is the key villain. He's even though we've seen more of Joe and of Chloe, as it turns out, she's been working with him as well. He's the one in charge. He's bankrolling it. It's his operation. They're working for him. And so the change in the dynamic, that she just takes it upon herself to kill him and take it over, is interesting. But it does kind of rob you a little bit of what you would expect of his ending.
I think they missed an opportunity in the sense that if they are thinking in terms of sequels, and I'm sure they are, then if I were them, I would have tried to figure out a way to keep Antonio Banderas and is it Tati Gabrielle? Something like that? Tatiana Gabrielle. I would have tried to keep them both on for the sequels.
Sorry, Tati Gabrielle. You're right. Yeah, but it'll be one of those where it changes all the time. I mean, you could, well, if you think about, I mean, you won't know the Uncharted games, but if you think about Indiana Jones, it changes all the time. It's the constant is Indiana Jones and his friends, and the villains change all. Well, I suppose they're normally Nazis.
I mean, that might be.
They change all the time.
Well, and I could see how that also would be an attraction. Yeah, that kind of you bring in a big star name, to be the villain in the next film. I can see how that would work also. Though, in order to attract a big star to playing a villain role, you have to write the characters a lot better than this one was written.
Well, they got Antonio Banderas.
Yeah, well, yeah, they'd have to do a lot better than that to draw someone else of that caliber or higher, right? Because, Antonio Banderas is not a box office star in Hollywood the way he once was, right? So, and I think, for sequels, you would want someone with a kind of a weight.
One more thing I want to say is one thing that I thought didn't work about the filmmaking, which for the most part is kind of competent, if not spectacular. One thing that I thought didn't work very well is the attempts to raise tension through kind of cross-cutting and things. So I'm thinking particularly about the auction scene, and also essentially the whole sequence in the church where the characters are separated. One goes up top, one goes down bottom, and there are these attempts to raise tension. You've only got a certain amount of time. You've got to get the lights out and all that kind of stuff. Just before, so we can steal the cross and so on and so forth. We've got to. You've got to get the key into your keyhole, otherwise we're going to drown. That should be raising tension more effectively than it was.
It was, and they missed a lot of opportunities. I mean, when you first see the nun in the cathedral, you think, people may be watching, people may be coming by while they're trying all this stuff. They could have just built that in, right? Like, and nun appears while they're trying to put the key in, or there was a lot of missed opportunities there, really. Yeah.
Well, that was actually one of the bits of what I thought was pretty bad dialogue, where they want to get into the church to, find this treasure, use the keys, and she goes and talks to the nuns, and she says, they're having a midnight mass, let's come back tomorrow. And it's like, okay, I mean, this gives you the opportunity to hang out and get drunk and have your story developments in the flat, but it's pretty lame dialogue.
Well, also, my immediate impression was she's lying to them. She's going to show up that evening.
Yeah, it could be that as well, yeah. And the other thing is just like, you're criminals, break in.
Yeah.
Who cares if there's a midnight mass on?